am Halcyon with the Denise Amber Lee Foundation, and this is ECC Essentials episode 4. And today we are talking about recognition at the state level. I'm super excited to have Dan Koenig and Arthur Kirby here to talk a little more about that, especially the efforts they've done in Florida. So I am going to pass it to them, have them introduce themselves, give a little bit of background, and then just dive into the conversation. And as always, as we go through, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we can talk them over as we go. So I will pass it over to you guys.
Dan, lead the way.
Okay. Hey, everybody. My name is Dan Koenig. I'm the Senior Manager for Palm Beach County 911 Program Services. And I'm also a past president of Florida NENA. And again, I've been in this business for over 30 years in different areas of public safety. And, always bounced around, but I always end up back in dispatch. That's where my heart is. Again, and I've worked with some great people. And that's one of the things that Art and I have been doing. Is hopefully we know we've worked with great people. We know what a great job they've done. We just know they need the recognition that they deserve. That's lacking both in Florida and many places nationwide. And Art?
My name is Arthur Kirby. I'm here in Tallahassee, Florida. I've been a public safety telecommunicator for just now going on 35 years. Like Dan, I've served in many, many different capacities, and I've certainly spent my time mainly on the front lines. I echo everything that Dan just said, that we know what our people need, and we try to represent and get them just that. I'm with Florida APCO. I was blessed to be placed on their board this past year. And I've been working on legislative affairs now for the past year. So where would you like to begin?
Okay. Well, I guess I'll kind of jumping in. And one of the things, I guess, for people looking at this, I mean, as we said, we know there's a long overdue need for 911 public safety telecommunicators to be recognized as first responders. Sometimes I'm going to say we're our own worst enemies. What we need to do, unfortunately, what we've learned through our runs through Tallahassee and also trying to help out National NENA and National APCO with the 911 Saves Act, is that we know what we do. The one thing that we talk about it, we kind of step away from what we do day to day, where we keep emotions out of what we do and we do our job and focus on the facts of what needs to be done. One of the things that I've learned during this is that we know what we do. We know the stories that we've heard. We know the calls that, we've taken and our colleagues have taken. But one of the things, though, once we get into the legislative level, those stories get us in the door. But once we get into legislative level, they're looking more for facts, figures, and information and data.
And two, it's certainly important to point out that what we're looking for takes on different meaning at different levels. I mean, the federal reclassification initiative is very different from the state, and in some cases, the local levels. So you have to kind of be clear what you're talking about and how you term what you're trying to accomplish. It can be intermixed and misunderstood very easily. So you have to really be able to zero in on your intent. That was one of our focus this year, that the word reclassification got us into it caused us some trouble, and so we had to rebrand, restructure how we were presenting the idea of being included into the title of first responder. And in fact, inclusion was the focus, and reclassification was much more of a federal term as it relates to the Department of Labor. So locally and on the state level, we've been staying away from that as much as possible.
Yeah, because we've learned, I think that's it. And, if we could give advice to anybody out there, the first thing before you even start looking at this, kind of do your homework. Know actually how is your occupation defined in your state? What I'm trying to say what the classification, but when it's listed, how is it classified though? Because there's a certain level between, a job classification and a retirement system classification. That was one of our biggest problems in Florida. That's where we had to look through. And one of the first things we started doing in this most recent attempt at getting recognition was going through the statutes and seeing where 911 telecommunicators belong. Where and first responders, where are first responders referenced and where are they defined in statutes? So we know what we're asking for. We can't just walk up and say, hey, here's what we do. We should be first responders. You also need to come in with a plan, of, where do you belong in this statute? Where do you belong in the overall system?
Big credit goes out to Dan. He found the 3 key words that brought us to the table. Seeing and hearing.
Yes, directly.
That little word hearing.
Yes. And it was in the statute was directly witnessing a crime is seeing or hearing for oneself. And right away that clicked with me like, well, I've been on the phones answering the calls. I believe probably everybody on this webinar has. We've witnessed crimes. We've heard it. We've also, that's the crime side of it. Also with their traumatic event. Yes, we've been through the idea of, giving CPR instructions to somebody on the phone with a family crying in the background. And, we've heard the commotion where the other thing that I say is, when I've spoken to people and speaking to some of our legislators, when somebody dials 911 and when we pick up the phone, understand that, intellectually and emotionally, we are on scene. We're not physically there, but those other 2 things, we're right there, right in the mix of it, setting things up and setting up for our fellow first responders, for EMS or police when they arrive on scene. But that was a good key for us though in Florida, that gave us a good step of how we could proceed.
And then with the work that has been done over the past few years on, what post-traumatic stress is and how it affects us and how we are also included into that. You feel the words, you feel the temperature of the call, and it affects you. Your heart rate goes up, your breathing changes, you constrict your muscles. Well, that same thing happening over and over again several times a day, that takes a beating on someone's body and things. And of course, the major events are even compound things. So fortunately for us, we've had some good scientific research on, proving for the first time ever that what we knew to be true, that we take a pounding almost on a daily basis, hour after hour, and that there's a cost to one's person on that, and it's really now just starting to come into its understanding amongst employers, even amongst employees, on how important it is to make sure that we have the things we need to be able to survive long term. And luckily we're at the forefront.
Yes, and that's one thing again. So, and one of the things that I've talked to other people about that, maybe started this. One of the things to do is I look at, maybe I'm diverging a little bit away from this, but do your job. But number one, because I've done it locally and worked with some of the PSAPs around in our area, to making sure that actually a job description also fits that. Because the next step when we go out and we start finding people that are going to help us and back us, a big part of it is actually job description. And, how do you put that into words to describe, it's call after call. I mean, my first resume was, to answer and process calls for service. And that was my whole job. And that's what a lot of people thought my job was until we get into it. The more that we do, when we talk about the documentation and data, this is what we need. Some of the things we need, some job descriptions to go in, for this, recognition.
That's exactly what was brought out by the Office of Management and Budget during the last round of job description analysis. We found out that the link that our weakest link was the fact that they pulled 1,000 different job descriptions from agencies all across the country and found out that they simply hadn't been updated. So the justification on the federal end was, your job descriptions are not including, the new technologies and the new responsibilities and the liabilities that you encounter. And the job descriptions on the local end, on the municipalities end, were such that we're keeping us to a clerical definition. So Dan's absolutely right. We have to make sure that our job descriptions are up to date constantly. And with Next Gen 911, it's even more important because you're actually going to be there at the scene visually before even the first rolling unit shows up. So it's going to be very important in the future that those job descriptions are spot on and sharp as a tack.
Yes. And, again, I can't, again, the big one that's out there, obviously, that's coming in, video, we're going to see it. Also, us in doing our due diligence, now you're going to have to be listening and looking at the same time. We're used to, you hear it on the phone, you're concentrating on what you're hearing. But now if you have a video that you're looking at, there's more information. You have to make sure to, where does that come in? And obviously that's going to add some, more stressors to the job. And that's one of the big things for, the first responder recognition is, yes, we deal with the same stress and, we deal with a lot of the same stress. We deal with a lot of the same things. And it's just moving forward that we need to memorialize that in paper of what we actually do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we were asked to talk about some more of the mechanics on how states that haven't been able to get recognition, where do you begin? And where do you begin starts with a core group of dedicated, dare I say, passionate individuals who are like-minded and are willing to dedicate a lot of time and energy to learning. You've got to know who, what, how. So anyone just starting out needs to get their education up front. You need to understand the process. You need to understand the players. You need to understand the stakeholders. And you have to have a very clearly defined, lack of a better term, end game. That's where it all starts on paper. It starts with a model. It's very much like a business model. You have to have a clear picture and direction and resolve, so to speak, to know, what direction are you going and where are you heading and what do you want to do and what do you want to accomplish and even what you're willing to accept and not accept. What are your deal breakers? What are your obstacles? What are your things that you just can't live with? And then you work from there and then you start asking questions.
Yes. Yeah, and that's a good one. And I mean, most of us within our agencies, even the smallest level, our agency heads, yes, they do a job, but a lot of them, yes, they're also in a political field where they have somebody. So find out within your organization, what happens in the legislative process. Is there a legislative affairs division? Is there somebody, political affairs division, somebody who does government relations? But find out those, seek out the experts within your own agency before you start building your plan. Go to, same thing we do every day. What do? You find out what the problem is and you send the experts to that. It's a hazmat scene, you send the hazmat unit. Well, here we go. We have a legislative problem. Let's get the legislative unit in here to help us.
Yeah. And it can take many different forms. Even some of your PIOs in local agencies will have different legislative contacts that can help steer you. But one of the key resources, is your voter registration card. Pull that registration card out and look who represents you. And keep in mind that even if they don't agree with your position, they still are A, subject matter experts, and B, they do represent you. So even starting there at your local level, even if it's a state representative or a federal representative, make the meetings in their home offices, in their home districts, and make friends. Oh, very important. Make friends with their aides.
Yes.
Because if you can win the confidence of their aides, you've got a lobbyist built right in.
Because one of the things that I learned along the process that I really didn't know until just this most recent year is across Florida, they have legislative delegations. And that is the perfect opportunity where you get up in public in front of other people that are pleading their case. But you go up and say, hey, 911, number one, everybody's like, yes, we love 911. This is great. They do a great job. That's fine. Then how, at this point, how come we're not first responders at this point? But that's where you gain also the help of other people. You're going to see other agencies, because Art was one that brought this out of, okay, let's reach out to other organizations. And honestly, it's political, but have a large scale. Okay, AARP, yes. Especially South Florida, I'll tell you. A lot of our EMS calls are the elder, senior population. But, have these people, bring them in as allies and let them know actually what you do. It's coming up in a few weeks. Another one is let the public know what you do, what you honestly do. National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week, a great time to publicize what we do. And this is what we should be doing, not just 1 week a year, but 52 weeks a year, making sure that we get this out there, finding out who our friends are and who knows exactly what we do, because then later on when we go, we need help, looking for people in the local area. And as Art said, on your voter registration card, okay, here's what we do. Now you have to look at the framework of the government and who's on what committees and who's doing this, and, have people that are doing their homework and go through and, okay, oh, here's a couple, representatives and senators that are pro public safety. We should probably approach them first.
We've probably thrown a lot out there. Is there any questions yet?
While we wait, I have a few questions as I'm over here trying furiously to write and probably have smoke coming off my page. I know you had mentioned, I think, Art, about like the studies of impacts. Is there anywhere that you would recommend people to go look for those studies, or do you know of any specifically to share?
The most, Dan, help me out. I just lost her name. What is the scientist who?
Well, Dr.
Go ahead.
Lilly.
Okay.
Yes, Dr. Lilly. Thank you.
Dr. Lilly is one.
And she's done 2 companion pieces to the original study that came out. And it's funny because she was a live speaker at an APCO conference a few years ago. She said how it all came about was a grad student of hers approached her and told her about communications and what went on, and they didn't have any kind of research on it. So she took it upon herself to say, okay, well, let's study it as a graduate research project, and it took off. It opened up things that people didn't even think about, and the research and the studies, and then the correlation of information just seemed to blossom. I mean, you can Google search Dr. Lilly and 911 communications, and just see the amount of everything from follow-up to media. That would be a great place to start, in my opinion, to get a baseline. We happen to have in Florida a nonprofit called the Second Alarm Project, and they have a website. Kelly O'Dare, who is, I will say up front, she is a dear friend and a fantastic clinician. She has also been instrumental in Florida, up here in North Florida especially, helping to help governments understand, the impact upon their public service employees and how they can be served by their peers. So to answer your question specifically, I would find a chaplain or a peer facilitator in someone's agency. Certainly looking online as a resource, and asking, who do you have locally that's looking into this? Who is it that's on a state level that has touched this issue? And just by asking the question, I think it'll peel back a bunch of different layers you wouldn't even necessarily know are out there. There's a lot more people there than you really are aware of until you actually go looking.
Awesome.
Does that answer your question?
That does, and I have a lot of Googling to do. I feel like I'm going to add to it too when I ask this next question. And again, if anybody has any questions at all, please feel free to put them in the chat. But talking about, where to begin and the education, again, resources are kind of like if you're someone who's like, I am really passionate about this topic, but I honestly just have zero idea how government works. Besides, I know that, they take taxes out of my paycheck. What kind of, direction would you point them? If any.
Yeah, if you're looking for something specifically towards like industry driven, like we're talking here, reach out to the two organizations, APCO and NINA. They have government relations specialists that can at least help drive you in the right direction. Early on when we started looking at some other things, we as a state chapter representative of Florida NINA, I reached out to their legislative director. And he steered me in the right way. The other one is too, for me, it's kind of always been a passion. I've always worked since I've been 14 years old. I've worked for governments. So naturally you learn a lot, but also you learn a lot. You also see what you're not getting. So that drove me, just my passion. Jokingly, it all starts with Schoolhouse Rock. And, yes, we're at the point of, we have the bills and we're trying to get it to be a law. But, the national organizations are good. And, again, Art said, Google is your best friend, to start looking for that. And the other resources too, if you can, attend your state and national conferences, because there are a lot of people, along with Dr. Adair and Dr. Lilly, other people, the people that are up there speaking, yes, they're entertaining and yes, they're that, but also they're subject matter experts in what they're doing. That's where you reach out, and that's the best part of networking. Find out. We're looking here at, I would say about 20 something people. Right now, everybody may have a passion for something or what do they like to do. But getting involved with the organizations and kind of breaking outside of your agency and talking to people from across the state. You get together, like-minded people get together and find out, where you want to do. Because same thing, we look at laws or we look at policies. Other people have done this. We started doing this. We did reach out. It was Jim Lockerbie up in New Jersey that got, I've spoken to him a few times. Some of the other states that, have the first responder designation, we reached out to them. What did you do right? What did you do wrong? So basically learning for our peers is a lot of what we do.
New York and Texas, especially. Yeah.
Yes.
So. Yeah, definitely taking advantage of that. I don't know about anybody else listening, but this has been so fantastic and obviously could be a much longer conversation. So we will most likely be having you guys back, whether you like it or not, and not really giving you an option. But just kind of as we wrap up, is there any kind of last things you want to add, or just share for those who are working on this in their state?
I mean, number one, for everybody on here, same thing. Thank you for what you do. I mean, obviously, number one, before we have other people appreciate us, we need to appreciate each other and thank each other. And even on the floor, do you sit there and say, hey, great job? Don't wait for other people to come into you. We need to start with ourselves and build ourselves up and get together, work together, and start that way. Because again, sometimes I said earlier, not to beat that a dead horse, but sometimes we're our own worst enemies.
And I can't say, I mean, Dan sums it up very well. It's a matter of being involved. It's a matter of bearing witness. It's a matter of being present. And I know our busy lives, you're off a 12-hour shift, sometimes longer, your days off, but it really comes down to being present, being involved, finding that 5 minutes to write an email, finding that lunch break where you can make a phone call. It means participating in government. You have to have a passion for it, and you have to be dedicated to the cause, to be focused. That this is where you're going to be. If it takes a year or 5 years, or God help us all, 20 years, then you're focused on the end game. You're focused on what the accomplishment is and where you want to go, and be persistent.
Yeah, that's both great. You guys summed it up amazingly. So thank you both again for your time, and I look forward to having you back for another chat on the topic. For anybody watching, just remember, we will put this out. It'll go on YouTube. It'll also be available on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts as the audio. If you have any questions, feel free to email myself, halcyon@deniseamberlee.org. And if they're for Dan or Art, I will be happy to forward them on to them. Also, don't forget to follow our ECC Essentials on Facebook to stay up to date on all the episodes. Erica and myself will be back next week, or excuse me, in 2 weeks, to actually talk about celebrating Dispatch Week and ideas and, just different things you can do. So if you're looking for ideas, be sure to join us for that. But with that, have a great rest of your afternoon. And again, thank you to these two gentlemen for sharing so much knowledge with us. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
All right, and thank you, Halcyon and Denise Amberlee Foundation, for putting on and starting up the ECC Essentials podcast. Again, that's one of the resources that we've been talking about for the past half hour or so.
Yes, thank you. We will see you guys next time.
Thank you, ma'am.
Bye, everyone.